Well, gosh, good to see you all again. I was trying to think of a story to compare with the Israelites in that reading from Exodus. And I've had quite a sheltered life really, so the idea of being spared from an invading army isn't part of my experience. But I remember one feeling of profound relief when we were driving on holiday a few years ago. We were going across the Severn Bridge and our engine blew up on our car. Now, I knew it was a 3-hour drive to Plymouth, roughly speaking. It's supposed to be 2 hours and 40 minutes or something, but I basically around 3 hours for the journey. And I'd added another 2 hours just in case, because I thought it might be nice to get dinner in Plymouth before we got on the ferry. So, you know, we started packing, and there's nothing went wrong with the packing, so I lost one of the hours spare. So instead of having 3 hours spare, we had 2 hours spare, and then we finally left. And then the car broke down. But it took the thick end of an hour for the AA to get to us. And then he towed us away to a roundabout at the other end of the Severn Bridge. And he looked, oh dear, he says, you've blown up your turbo. There's a rubber elbow joining the turbo to the engine. It's a diesel engine. And basically, when the engine hits a certain speed, it relies on blown air. There's just not enough air pressure to push enough air in. So we could do like 30 miles an hour reasonably comfortably, but after that the engine just ran out of all power and just started belching black smoke out of the back. So he kind of scratched his head, and he's a kind of old-fashioned mechanical bloke, the kind that had loads of junk in the back of his van. So he scratched around in his junk and he picked up for us some tin snips, a length of webbing, a pile of cable ties, a few Jubilee clips, some really big ones. And he says, he kind of thinking for a moment, he says, have you got any cans on you? Now I don't actually drink anything out of a can, so I didn't. So we went through all the bins around the car park where we were then got to and looked for cans. So he found a couple of cans and he was kind of trying to work it out. And I tweaked what he meant. So I cut one can in a kind of spiral shape, like a spring. And then I cut another can in a zigzag going up and down. And we wrapped the spiral can around this elbow of rubber. We then bandaged it up with gaffer tape. We then put the other can around with the zigzag. So now you've got the metal going in 2 different directions, forming a kind of mat. Then we put another layer of gaffer tape over that layer of metal. We then put the webbing straps around for real tensile strength. We then had to join 2 Jubilee clips to each other on each end, because it's quite a big pipe, being an air pipe. We then clamped it as hard as we could on each end to make it airtight. And we then put cable ties all the way along to hold it all together in place. And then we started. And then I realised we had 2 hours, not a minute more, to get to Plymouth from that car park the other side of the thing, down the M5 and along the A5 and then into Plymouth itself. And I thought, oh no, we're going to fail. We're not going to make it. We thought, well no, never say never, come on, let's try. So we drove off and then we hit roadworks and thought, oh no. And then we had to go down to 50, but then the traffic just kept on moving. We sort of slowed right down for a moment and I just thought, oh, this is it, this is where we lose it. No, picked up again, we went off out the other end, back up to 70, carried on down the motorway, and then hit more roadworks. Oh God, we're going to do it again. But no, the traffic kept on going, 50, go through, out the other end, back up to 70 again, keep going, and then we hit congestion around Plymouth. Oh no, this is it! No, we carried on. We rolled through Plymouth, we rolled through the town, we rolled onto the queue, and then we just drove onto the boat. And I couldn't believe we'd actually made it. I was absolutely amazed. I really thought we were just going to miss it, but I was thinking, what do we do next? We actually phoned up Brittany Ferries on the way and said, well, that's okay, you know, if you miss that one, you can get another one. There's one going from another port somewhere along the south coast. And then I was thinking, oh gosh, how do we navigate along the south coast in time for the next boat going sometime that evening? But we got it. And we kind of pulled on, and I sat down and I just thought, I can't believe we actually made it. But then for about the next week, I was just thinking, I can't believe we actually got on that boat. I was just amazed. And that sense of relief, you know, it's okay, we've come out, it's going to be okay. And that must have been how the disciples, when they saw it, because, I mean, the first of that section from John, the last time they saw him, he was in pieces. You know, he was he'd been ripped apart with his flogging, and they'd seen him stabbed. They'd seen his body, like in a revolting state, taken down, and that was that. And they remembered all the prophecies about the Messiah, all the promises and their hopes for freedom, all that he seemed to stand for them, and it all just seemed smashed. They just thought, what is going on? You know, we were wrong. We were mistaken. Something has gone wrong, and no matter what we thought of this guy, it hasn't happened. You know, they're crushed. They're heartbroken. You know, what do we do now? We've just left 3 years of our life to do this, and it was wrong. What next? How do you pick up the pieces after that? And then it says they're together. John says the door was locked, to emphasise the fact it was locked. They're shut in, barricaded in, if you like. And he's just standing there with them. And they're astounded. They're just gobsmacked. And if you read the account in Luke, it says how they all think he's a ghost. They're terrified. And he says, no, I'm not a ghost. Give me something to eat. And I think he has some fish or some honey or something. And then it says they were overjoyed. They were just so happy. And when were you happy? Have you ever been happy? Has anything good ever happened that cheered you up? They were overjoyed. They were bursting with happiness. And poor Thomas wasn't there. And I was trying to think back to him, you know, what would it have been like? They come running out. They must have just seemed like nuts. They just seemed like lunatics. He just thought, what on earth are you on about? You know, I can't buy this. And what kind of story is that? You're just winding me up. And then he sees him. And that's basically why John finishes the account with the way he does. That these things are written that you might believe that the Messiah, the Son of God, is Jesus. That's why he wrote it. That's what it's for. If you ask the question, why did John write this book? Well, that's why. He's written it partly so that we can find out, but also so that we can continue. He's written it so that those who simply don't know can discover that the Son of God, the Messiah, is Jesus. And he's written it to us, who already might have twigged that, to remind us and to strengthen us in that. Because the emphasis on this is about believing. He said, blessed are you, blessed are those who have believed yet not even seen. That's Jesus. Blessed are those. I kicked myself because I didn't look up which word for blessed that's come from. Because in Greek there are two words that are often rendered blessed. There's one, ologomene, which means blessed in the sense of life-giving and fruitful and all that kind of thing. And there's another sense of blessed meaning happy. You know, you're well off, you're better off for this. Makarios. And the Beatitudes use the word makarios. So it says, you're happy, you're well off when you're suffering, basically, which is, you might say, counterintuitive. But if someone blesses your flocks and your herds and your orchards, it means you get lots of babies and fruit and that kind of thing. But I think both meanings might apply here. We're well off if we believe. But not only are we well off, not only are we cheered up by the knowledge, we're actually given life by that knowledge. That belief actually confers life. As John says, that you might have life in his name. Life in all its fullness. And the reason I particularly wanted this reading from Exodus is because that reading from Exodus describes the transition of the children of Israel from Egypt out of Egypt. That is the event which marks when they actually left. The Passover is that terrible night when it says there was not a house without its dead. A great cry went up from Egypt. And that's, if you like, the deliverance. And it says, Jesus, our Passover, has been sacrificed, therefore let us keep the feast. But they were not quite free. They were running away. But the army was chasing them. And they got to the sea. And they thought, oh gosh, and that word they said to Moses, were there not enough graves in Egypt? You had to bring us here to die? You know, is there something wrong with dying in Egypt? Why can't we just die there? Why all the running about? And then the Lord clears the sea. And there's this really interesting thing. It says, and all night the wind blew on the sea, the strong east wind. And it says the cloud separated them from the Egyptians. And then at night, the cloud illuminated. It shone, it glowed. The pillar of fire by night, the pillar of cloud by day. The cloud, the presence of God, separated the Israelites from the Egyptians. And it came behind them, so the Egyptians could not catch them up. It says the sea was a wall to their left and to their right. And I take that amongst other things, meaning that the Egyptians couldn't outflank them. They couldn't go round it because there was the sea. The only way they could go, the Israelites, was forward, because on either side was the sea and the army. So they went forward. And notice how it says it was on dry land. And if you cast your mind back, you might remember the story of creation. It says, and the breath of God, the wind of God, the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And dry land appeared. Exactly the same vocabulary. The same words. It's symbolic somehow of a kind of creative act. That God is creating for himself a new people by taking the Israelites through the sea, out of Egypt, out of slavery, out of bondage and captivity. This is the moment when he actually sets them free. And if you said, why are we baptized? We're baptized partly because Jesus was baptized. Why was Jesus baptized? It symbolized his death and resurrection. Here is the resurrection. Here is the sign of joy that he is risen, that his disciples have seen him, and they are glad, they are happy, because they know now that it's true. And that Song of the Sea, which is the last bit of that reading from Exodus, they took it, those two lines from the end, from 20:21. But it begins, the whole thing up to that point is what's called the Song of the Sea. And it begins and it says, the Moses and the Israelites sang to the Lord. Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Shir Yahweh Ga'ol Ga'ah. Ga'ol Ga'ah in Hebrew means literally, rising, he has risen. Which was implying he has triumphed gloriously. But I can't believe it actually says that in the song. Rising, he has risen. Jesus is risen. That is the triumph. That is the final victory. He has won. He has turned around the apparent defeat of death and vindicated us in the sight of God. One of the great challenges of life is that as we go through life, we know that everything we do will die. We will die. And for someone like Richard Dawkins, who says quite categorically his life is meaningless, he's just a random collection of atoms, you think, well, why on earth are you doing anything then? Why are you even bothering talking to me? Because your words are meaningless. But they're not meaningless. And we are vindicated because Jesus has risen from the dead. And therefore our lives are filled with purpose. But not just our lives, our suffering and our death as well. Because Jesus was perfected by suffering, it says in the letter to the Hebrews. He went through his suffering to make everything complete. Therefore, his suffering was meaningful. It was purposeful. It was the will of the Father, and it had a reason. And that reason was vindicated when he presented himself to his friends that evening and says, look, here I am. Give me something to eat. I'm starving. He shared his happiness with them. And those words, the first words he said, peace be with you. Shalom lechem. Peace. Because Christ is our peace. He won peace for us on the cross. He is our peace. He created peace. Peace with God. Because in him, having believed in him, we are no longer enemies of God. We're no longer sinners and rebels. We're no longer fugitives, captives doomed to die. We are now, as John puts it so beautifully in his letter, we have become children of God. And he encourages us. We declare to you what was from the beginning, what we have heard, what we have seen with our eyes, what we have looked at, what we have touched with our hands. John says, this is what I saw, this is what I heard, this is what I touched with my own body concerning the word of life. Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah. This life was revealed and we have seen it. And we testify to it. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. Because by believing, we receive life in his name. But he urges us, that's not the end of the story. If we say we have fellowship with him while we're walking in darkness, we lie and do not do what is true. But if we walk in the light, as he himself is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. We have fellowship with one another, and we have fellowship with God. We are with him wherever we go. And notice throughout that reading, he draws these opposites, light and darkness, truth and lie, life and death. These, if you like, are the choices, the very meaningful choices laid before us. And they're bound together. Truth, light, life. Falsehood, darkness, death. They are real, meaningful choices. And he urges us to walk in the light for every abundant blessing that comes with that. For every good thing. For all the truth, the righteousness, the goodness, the joy, the happiness, everything that comes with that. To persevere in walking in that light and that truth and that goodness. And that's good news. Amen. Thank you, everyone.